He had everything: fortune, status, power. But nothing had prepared him for what was about to happen. On that cold, rainy night, an unexpected encounter would change his life forever. Gabriel Lancaster, a millionaire surrounded by luxury, spotted a homeless woman curled up under an awning. Something about her made him stop. She wasn't just another beggar. There was something different in her eyes, something he couldn't ignore. As he reached out to help her, he had no idea how much that moment would alter his life. Years later, that same woman would return, and with a revelation that would make Gabriel question everything: his life, his choices, and his past. What was she hiding? And why did it make him cry? The city was eerily silent that night. A light drizzle formed puddles on the filthy sidewalks. Gabriel Lancaster drove slowly through the deserted downtown streets, lost in thought. His headlights illuminated dark corners, revealing faces invisible by day. Men and women huddled under scraps of cardboard, trying to shield themselves from the cold. He had seen this scene countless times, so often that it had become part of the city's landscape. But then he saw her, amidst so many forgotten souls. A woman curled up against a wall, hugging her knees, caught his attention. Her rain-soaked hair clung to her pale face in tangled strands. Her worn, dirty clothes couldn't quite hide the dignity still lingering in her gaze. She wasn't begging, wasn't pleading for help. She simply watched the city as if waiting for something, or someone. For some reason, an uneasy feeling stirred in Gabriel's chest. Something made him hit the brakes. It didn't make sense. He was a successful businessman, not the kind to get involved in situations like this. He had donated fortunes to charities, invested in social projects. But he had never stopped to truly see someone like this up close. Without knowing why, he opened the car door and walked toward her. The woman lifted her eyes slowly, without fear, without shame. "Do you need help?" Gabriel asked, surprised at his own question. She remained silent for a moment. Then she let out a short, humorless laugh. "I need a lot of things," she finally said. "But money isn't one of them." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. That was unexpected. Usually, when someone offered help, the answer was always the same: any amount was welcome. But this woman was different. "Then what do you need?" he insisted. She looked away, watching the distant cars pass. A fresh start. Those words echoed in Gabriel's mind. A fresh start. Something so simple yet so impossible for some people. He glanced at his watch. It was late. He could easily get back in his car and leave. This woman wasn't his problem. But for some reason, he felt that if he walked away now, he'd be making a mistake. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Helena." The name sounded familiar, though he didn't know why. Gabriel took a deep breath. He wasn't a reckless man. Every decision in his life was calculated, every move carefully planned. But that night, without fully understanding why, he made a different choice. "Come with me." Helena didn't move. Her expression was unreadable. "Why?" He thought for a moment before answering. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything." A long silence stretched between them. Then, without another word, she stood up. They walked toward the car together. And as Helena climbed in and shut the door, Gabriel knew that nothing would ever be the same again. What he didn't know was just how much his life was about to change. The car glided smoothly through the empty streets as silence settled between them. Gabriel kept his hand steady on the wheel, stealing discreet glances at Helena in the rearview mirror. She sat curled up in the passenger seat, arms crossed as if trying to take up as little space as possible. Her body trembled slightly, maybe from the cold, maybe from distrust. He could have taken her to a hotel, arranged a comfortable room, and ended his involvement in her story right there. But something stopped him from treating her like a problem to be solved with money. For the first time in a long while, he felt the need to understand. "How long have you been on the streets?" he asked, eyes still on the road. Helena took a few seconds to respond. 3 years. A short answer, yet it carried an unbearable weight. 3 years without a home, without an address, without knowing where she'd sleep each night. Gabriel tried to imagine what it would be like to lose everything, and a strange discomfort settled inside him. "Before that, what did you do?" She let out a hollow laugh. "I had a home, a job, a husband." He waited for her to continue. But silence filled the space between them again. He didn't push. He could already tell that Helena spoke only when necessary. When they arrived at his apartment, Gabriel hesitated before unlocking the door. He wasn't the kind of man who brought strangers into his home. There was something reckless about this decision. But for the first time in years, he ignored logic and followed his instincts. Helena stepped inside cautiously, her eyes scanning the space with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. The apartment was spacious, elegant, filled with expensive furniture and carefully planned lighting. Every detail exuded wealth and power. "You can take a shower," Gabriel said, pointing down the hall. "I'll get you some clothes." Helena nodded without a word. When the bathroom door closed behind her, Gabriel let out a sigh. He himself had no idea what he was getting into. Hot water streamed down Helena's face as she scrubbed her skin, trying to wash away years of dirt and humiliation. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth relax her muscles for the first time in a long while. She thought back to the last time she had taken a decent shower. It must have been before everything fell apart, before the betrayal, before the abandonment, before losing everything she once thought was unshakable. When she stepped out, she found a set of clean clothes neatly placed on the bed. She picked up the shirt, feeling the soft fabric against her skin, and a wave of emotion hit her. It had been so long since she had touched anything this comfortable. Dressed, she walked back into the living room. Gabriel sat there, holding a cup of coffee, lost in thought. He looked up as she approached. "Feeling better?" She nodded. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down. I want to understand your story." Helena hesitated for a moment before pulling out the chair and sitting. She crossed her arms on the table, took a deep breath, and began. "I was a teacher. Literature. I loved my job. But loving what you do doesn't pay the bills." Gabriel stayed silent, listening intently. "I married young. Thought I had a stable life. My husband handled our finances. I trusted him. Until one day, I woke up with nothing." She gave a bitter smile. "Frozen accounts, mountains of debt, a foreclosed home. He vanished, left me with everything and disappeared." Gabriel frowned. "And you couldn't recover?" She let out a tired sigh. "I tried, but with a ruined credit score, an impossible debt, and an eviction, there weren't many chances to start over. I lost my job soon after. Who would hire a 40-something-year-old woman with no address and a mountain of debt?" He had no response. "I thought it was temporary," she continued, "that I'd find a way out. But days turned into months. Months turned into years." Silence filled the room again. Gabriel leaned back in his chair, feeling a weight settle in his chest. He had always seen poverty as something distant, just numbers in a statistic. He had never stopped to think about how someone could fall so fast. "What do you want now?" he asked. She met his gaze. "A job. I don't want charity. I don't want handouts. I just want to prove that I'm still capable." There was a quiet determination in her voice that surprised him. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll find something for you." Helena's eyes flickered with something almost like hope, before returning to their guarded neutrality. "Thank you." Gabriel didn't reply. He simply took a sip of his coffee, knowing that from this moment on, nothing in his life would ever be the same. The sun had yet to rise when Helena woke up. She had slept on the couch, despite Gabriel insisting that she use one of the guest rooms. She didn't want to get too comfortable. She didn't want to forget that this was temporary. The feeling of a soft mattress beneath her was almost a shock to her muscles, which had grown accustomed to the hardness of cold pavement or the discomfort of park benches. She had slept deeply, without the constant fear of being woken up by a security guard yelling at her to leave, by someone trying to steal her few belongings, or by the biting wind of the streets. And yet, as she opened her eyes, she felt a strange mix of relief and unease. She was no longer out in the open, but the feeling that she didn't belong here remained. As she sat up, she noticed a neatly folded set of clean clothes resting on the arm of the couch. Gabriel must have left them there before heading to work. Simple clothes, but new. Clothes that seemed to say you deserve a fresh start. But did she? She took a deep breath and headed to the bathroom. Looking at herself in the mirror, she still saw a stranger. When she stepped out of the room, she found Gabriel in the kitchen. He was already awake, dressed impeccably, sipping his coffee while reading something on his phone. He glanced up when he saw her. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," she admitted honestly. He nodded and gestured toward the chair across from him. "Eat something. I need to talk to you." Helena hesitated for a moment before sitting down. She picked up a slice of bread and ate slowly, chewing as the weight of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours settled on her. She couldn't remember the last time she had a peaceful meal in such a quiet space. Gabriel leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table as he studied her. "You said you want a job." She put the bread down and met his gaze. "Yes. What if I offered you one here?" Helena frowned. "Here?" "Yes. I need someone to organize some documents, take care of small tasks in my office. It wouldn't be exhausting, just enough to help you get back on your feet." She considered his words carefully. "This isn't charity." A small smile tugged at his lips. "It's an opportunity. Take it or leave it." Helena took a deep breath. The idea of relying on someone made her uneasy, but she knew she wouldn't get another chance like this. "I'll take it." Gabriel nodded and stood up. "Good. We start tomorrow." She remained seated, staring at the coffee cooling in her cup. She knew this offer meant more than just a job. It was her chance to prove, to Gabriel and to herself, that she still could. The next day, when she arrived at the office, she felt every gaze land on her. Gabriel's employees analyzed her from head to toe, trying to figure out who she was. This woman dressed modestly but clearly out of place. No one said anything, but she could feel their judgment in the air. Gabriel led her to a discreet desk, set apart from the others. "You can start by organizing these files," he said, gesturing toward a stack of papers. "If you need anything, let me know." Helena simply nodded. She sat down and got to work. Throughout the morning, she felt curious glances lingering on her. Whispered conversations, suppressed laughter. At one point, a blonde woman in an expensive outfit walked past and muttered just loud enough to be heard, "The new assistant has a peculiar scent." A few quiet chuckles followed. Helena kept her eyes on the papers, pretending she hadn't heard, but her face burned. She knew she didn't belong here, and deep down, she feared she never would. The morning dragged on. The work itself wasn't difficult, but it was draining. Sorting papers, scanning documents, verifying information. A simple job, but every minute in that office felt like a test of endurance. At lunchtime, Gabriel appeared at her door. "Let's eat?" She hesitated. "I'd rather stay here." He raised an eyebrow. "Helena, you need to eat." "I know. I'd just rather avoid people." Gabriel sighed. "If you're worried about what they think, ignore them. I've seen this before. They judge, but they have no idea who you are." Helena let out a humorless chuckle. "Do you know who I am?" He didn't answer right away. "Not yet," he admitted. "But I'd like to." She held his gaze for a moment before finally standing up. In the building's restaurant, Gabriel's presence alone was enough to turn heads. He was respected, feared. But when he walked in with Helena, the stares intensified. People whispered, "Who is she? Looks like the boss's latest charity case. I bet she won't last a week here." Helena pretended not to hear. She sat at the table and waited for Gabriel to speak. "Tell me more about yourself." She took a deep breath. "I already told you. I was a teacher. And before that, what did you want to be?" She frowned. "What do you mean? When you were young, what was your dream?" Helena fell silent. For a moment, she forgot the restaurant, the whispers, the stares. She went back in time. She saw herself at 15, excitedly holding a book in her hands, filling the pages of an old notebook with stories. She remembered the teacher who had encouraged her, telling her she had talent. "I wanted to be a writer," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel smiled slightly. "Then maybe you still can be." She laughed, skeptical. "You don't start over at 40. He crossed his arms. "Who says?" She had no answer for that. And for the first time in years, she felt something stir inside her. Hope. The clock read mid-afternoon when Helena finally took a deep breath. The office was in full swing. Employees moving back and forth, phones ringing nonstop, voices blending with the frantic clatter of keyboards. But to her, it all felt like it was happening in slow motion. She was still trying to process everything that had happened since the previous night. Seated at a small desk tucked away from the center of the action, she organized stacks of documents, doing her best to ignore the judgmental stares around her. It was as if everyone in the office had an opinion about her, but no one dared to say it out loud. "Are you comfortable?" A male voice broke through her thoughts. Helena looked up and saw a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit, his smile cold and unreadable. She recognized his name from the documents she had been sorting. Arthur Donovan, the company's chief financial officer. "Yes," she answered, refusing to look away. He crossed his arms, studying her with interest. "You appeared out of nowhere. One day no one knew who you were. The next you're working directly for Mr. Lancaster." Helena kept her expression neutral. "He gave me an opportunity." Arthur tilted his head slightly. "Yes, Gabriel is a generous man, but generosity has its limits." The veiled warning sent a knot tightening in Helena's stomach, but she wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of seeing her falter. "I didn't ask for charity," she said slowly. "I asked for a job." Arthur smirked. "Let's see if you can keep it." Then he turned and walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She knew this would happen. It always happened. The world didn't like seeing people try to start over. It was easier to keep the failures on the ground, far from a second chance. Helena took a deep breath, pushed the tension aside, and went back to organizing the papers. At the end of the day, Gabriel called her into his office. "How was your first day?" She hesitated before answering. "Better than I expected. Worse than I'd like." He chuckled. "That's a good start." Gabriel picked up an envelope from his desk and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked, wary. "Your first payment. An advance." She frowned. "But I haven't really done anything yet." His expression was serious. "You started. That already means something." Helena took the envelope carefully. It had been so long since she held money that was truly hers. This small gesture meant more than Gabriel could possibly understand. When they got back to the apartment, Helena went straight to the guest room, where her few clothes were folded on a chair. She looked at them and sighed. If she truly wanted to start over, she needed to take a bigger step. Stepping out of the room, she found Gabriel on the couch reading emails on his phone. "I need something," she said hesitantly. He looked up. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "I need to buy some clothes. Something decent for work." Gabriel studied her for a moment before responding. "Tomorrow morning we'll take care of it." Helena nodded, but just as she turned to leave, she heard him add, "And before you say anything, it's not charity." For the first time in a long while, she smiled. And that night, she slept with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The morning was gray and heavy, as if mirroring Helena's unease. She had woken up early, even before Gabriel, and now sat on the bed, staring at the envelope with the advance payment. Her fingers brushed over the paper hesitantly. It represented more than just a sum of money. It was the first payment she had received from honest work in years. For the first time, it wasn't a handout. It wasn't charity. But as much as she wanted to feel victorious, a part of her still feared that this was all temporary. She got up and looked at her reflection in the mirror. A tired face, dark circles, messy hair. She still couldn't see herself as someone who belonged here, in this luxurious apartment, in this world that wasn't hers. When she stepped into the living room, she found Gabriel already dressed, drinking his coffee. He looked at her and gave a small smile. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes," she replied, though she wasn't entirely sure. He took a sip of his coffee and tilted his head slightly. "Good. Let's take care of your clothing situation today." Helena hesitated. "I could go alone." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "You could, but I doubt you will." She sighed. He was right. A part of her still resisted the idea of accepting help. Gabriel grabbed his keys and walked to the door. "Let's go." The shopping mall was an entirely different world from the one Helena had known. As soon as she stepped inside, she felt the stares. Women in high heels and designer bags, polished salespeople, men in expensive suits. She immediately felt out of place. Gabriel walked beside her with effortless confidence, unfazed by the people's reactions. He stopped in front of an upscale store and gestured toward the entrance. "Pick whatever you want." Helena hesitated. "Are you sure?" Gabriel sighed. You want a fresh start, don't you? Then you need to let yourself feel like you belong here. She swallowed hard and stepped inside. The saleswomen quickly scanned her. At first they seemed indifferent, but as soon as they noticed Gabriel, their attitudes shifted. Suddenly they were all smiles, eager to assist. "How can I help you?" one of them asked, adjusting her blazer. Helena looked at the racks of clothing, feeling an uncomfortable knot in her stomach. Everything seemed too expensive. She didn't want to waste her money on luxury. "I just need something simple," she said. The saleswoman exchanged a glance with her colleague but didn't comment. Helena chose discreet, well-tailored pieces. When she looked at herself in the fitting room mirror, something shifted inside her. For the first time in years, she saw herself with dignity. On the drive back, a heavy silence filled the car. Gabriel, focused on the road, was the first to break it. "Tell me more about yourself." Helena turned to the window. "What do you want to know?" "You mentioned a husband. What happened to him?" Her fingers tensed on her lap. "He destroyed my life and disappeared." Gabriel noted the edge in her voice. "Did you ever try to find him?" She let out a humorless laugh. "For months, but he was smart. He planned everything carefully." Gabriel remained silent for a moment, absorbing her words. "And if you could find him now?" Helena finally turned her gaze to him. "I don't know, but sometimes I think he still owes me something." There was something in her tone that sent a chill down Gabriel's spine. He couldn't explain why, but he had the distinct feeling that this story was far from over. The night had fallen quietly over the city. Helena sat on the apartment's balcony, watching the distant city lights flicker. The scent of rain still lingered in the air, and the cold wind made her hair dance softly. Gabriel was in his office finishing a few calls, but she knew he would come looking for her eventually. Since their conversation in the car, she could feel that he wanted to know more, and now she felt ready to tell him. When Gabriel stepped onto the balcony, he carried 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her and sat in the chair beside her. "You seem different," he said. Helena let out a quiet chuckle. "Different how?" "Before you always looked ready to run. Now, I don't know. It looks like you've decided to stay." She looked at him for a moment, then turned her gaze back to the city. "Maybe because I've realized I can't keep running forever." Gabriel took a sip of his coffee and waited. He knew she had something to say. Helena took a deep breath. "I told you about my husband, but what I didn't say is that he didn't just leave me with nothing. He did much worse." Gabriel remained silent, giving her space to continue. "He manipulated me for years, made me trust him, put everything in my name, convinced me he was taking care of me. I thought I was safe. But then, one morning, I woke up, and everything I had was gone. The accounts, the house, the assets, all of it." Gabriel frowned. "He planned everything?" "Yes," she confirmed. "I found out that for months before he disappeared, he had been draining our joint accounts, secretly selling off whatever he could, and by the time I realized, it was too late." Gabriel pressed his lips together. "And no one tried to help you?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Do you really think anyone cares about a broke, homeless woman with nothing? I tried to take legal action, tried to find a loophole to reclaim what was mine, but he planned it all so that I'd be the one left to take the fall." Gabriel felt anger rising inside him. "Do you know where he is now?" Helena shook her head. "No, but if I did..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Gabriel understood exactly what she meant. The next few days passed quickly. Helena was adapting to her new job, but the whispers and stares still followed her. At the office, Arthur Donovan continued watching her from a distance. He never said anything directly, but he always seemed too interested in her every move. One afternoon, as the workday was ending, Helena was organizing some files when Arthur approached. "Working hard?" She didn't look up. "I do my best." Arthur gave a faint smirk. "You know there are people here who don't want you around, don't you?" She finally lifted her eyes to him. "And are you one of them?" He chuckled. "I'm just curious. People like you don't just show up in this world without a reason." Helena frowned. "What do you mean?" Arthur leaned in slightly. "What do you think happens when ghosts from the past come back?" A chill ran down her spine. Arthur stepped back and walked away without another word. Helena stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But one thing was certain. Someone knew more about her past than she ever imagined. Arthur's words echoed in Helena's mind. What do you think happens when ghosts from the past come back? That wasn't a casual question, it was a challenge. And what terrified her most was the certainty that he knew something about her, something she hadn't yet discovered herself. That night, lying in the guest room of Gabriel's apartment, Helena couldn't sleep. The discomfort grew with each memory, each thought of her past, and the man who had destroyed her. She felt like a chess piece being moved without knowing where the game would take her next. By 2 a.m., unable to stand the restlessness any longer, she got up and stepped onto the balcony. Gabriel was already there, as if he had been expecting her. "Can't sleep?" he asked, eyes still on the illuminated cityscape. "No." He sighed and took a sip of the whiskey in his hand. "I saw the way Arthur spoke to you today." Helena crossed her arms. "Do you think he knows something?" Gabriel hesitated. "I think he knows more about your past than you realize." Helena felt her stomach twist. "How?" Gabriel turned to her. "Because I had someone investigate your husband." A cold shock ran through her. "You? What?" "I needed to know who I was dealing with. You may have stopped looking for him years ago, but I can assure you he never stopped hiding." Helena's hands trembled. "Did you find him?" Gabriel nodded. "Yes." Her heart pounded. "Where is he?" Gabriel watched her carefully before answering. "Much closer than you think." Helena held her breath. "What does that mean?" Gabriel set his glass down and stepped toward her. "Your husband, he never really left. He just changed his name, his life." Her pulse thundered in her ears. Gabriel's next words shattered everything. "He's here working for me." The world spun. Helena's legs wobbled and she gripped the balcony railing for support. That's not possible." Gabriel's expression remained firm. "Arthur Donovan." Helena went pale. "No." Everything clicked into place. The way Arthur watched her, the way he provoked her. It had never been random. He had never been missing. He had always been close. And now he was toying with her, waiting to see what she would do when she found out the truth. Gabriel's voice was calm but serious. "What are you going to do?" Helena swallowed hard. "What he did to me. He destroyed my life, took everything from me." Gabriel nodded. "Then maybe it's time for you to decide how this story ends." Helena looked out at the city. For the first time in years, she felt like she had power. And this time, she wouldn't be the one to lose everything. If you were in Helena's place, what would you do after discovering that your worst enemy had been right under your nose all along? Did this story move you? Then you can't miss what's coming next. A shocking twist, an intense drama, and a lesson that will leave you thinking. Click now to find out what happens next. See you there.